Hey, so this is a really tough topic today, sexual assault and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And yet, if I can help even one person understand that recovery is possible, feeling better is possible, and that this was not your fault, then this video will be worth it. If this is your first time on my channel, my name is Barbara Heffernan, and I'm a psychotherapist who's been helping people recover from anxiety and trauma for over 15 years. And I created this YouTube channel to try to bring some psychotherapy techniques, some Buddhist philosophy, some tips and tools for people to live a happier life. And I'm trying to bring that to a broader population. So if you support my work here, please subscribe to my channel. That's one of the most supportive things you can do. And also give me a thumbs up on this video and comment below once you've watched it and let me know what you think. And I greatly appreciate your support. And of course, if you feel that this video would be helpful for someone you know in your life who's experienced a sexual assault, please share it with them. I do want to give a trigger warning here. I am going to be discussing two very difficult situations. The stories of two clients that I've worked with a number of details changed and names changed, obviously, all to protect confidentiality. But these stories are difficult to hear. So I won't be going into any excessive detail, but it's important for you to modulate how you're feeling as you listen to this video. And if you'd like to skip right over to the recovery and treatment portion of the video, I will put that detail in the notes below so you can do that. My main message with this video is one of recovery and hope. One of the truly hardest things about my work is hearing stories where human beings treat other human beings in a horrible manner, treat them as if they are objects, worse than animals. And that is really the hardest piece. However, that is countered by the resilience of the trauma victims that I work with and the people who have been through horrendous things, who go on to lead amazing, incredible, caring, open-hearted lives. Sexual assault and abuse rob us of many things. Our sexuality is really at the core of our being. It's really part of our soul, and that can be severely damaged with sexual assault, and I mean the full range of sexual assault. We can feel so damaged by it that we think that we'll never get over it. It really can go to our core. And yet recovery is possible. I've seen it many times, and I will include at the end of this video sort of some initial steps you can take if you're struggling with this, and I'll also include a number of resources in the notes to the video below. So I'm going to share the stories of two people who suffered pretty significant sexual assaults and who recovered and went on to live very happy lives. And so the stories are positive, but as I said, these are difficult to listen to. So the first one is going to be about Ruth and the second about Tabitha. And as I mentioned, names and identifying details have been changed. So I've worked with a number of women who were raped by somebody who used the date rape drug. And which is really it's just a horrible thing. It's almost inconceivable how somebody could do that. And the women's experience was all fairly similar, which was that they had an immediate blackout when they were, pretty much wherever they were, where they were given the drug, and they don't remember large periods of time. And then they have flashes of memory of the abuse or assault happening, and it's not really a huge amount of context, just more flashes of images, knowing what happened, being able to visualize it, and then again more of a blackout until they wake up wherever they happen to have been left. If they go immediately to the hospital, they generally can be tested, drug tested, to confirm what happened to them, confirm that they were given a drug and receive some medical attention and some assistance. But many women don't do that. However, if this ever does happen to you or someone you know, there are rape crisis lines. You can also pick up the phone and call, and you also can call the police for help or go to the hospital. So Ruth came into my office about 6 months after this happened to her. And what had happened is she is a professional woman. She was running a business with her husband, a family business, and she went out to dinner with one of the most prominent businessmen in the area, very well-known person, and it was to talk about business. It was set up in a completely appropriate way. She went to have dinner, and he slipped her a drug, and she has flashes of what happened through the night, and then woke up feeling very, very sick, back in her car in a parking lot where he had left her. So she didn't tell anybody that this happened. She felt ashamed. She felt somehow she had done something wrong, which is a very, very common feeling that sexual abuse and sexual assault victims have. And she had done nothing wrong. So her shame kept her from telling anybody, and yet she began to have panic attacks, which she had never had before. She began to have nightmares where she would wake up screaming. She had difficulty sleeping at all. She began to have a hard time eating. And the flashbacks of the event, the flashbacks of the pieces that she did remember just kept intruding on her and intruding on her in the middle of the day. And she was panicked. She didn't know what to do. And she finally confided in a friend what happened. And the friend helped her look up therapists who could help. And that's when she eventually called me. So she was having all the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD symptoms fall into the category of hypervigilance, which is like panic attacks, being worried, being nervous all the time, avoidance, avoiding thinking about things, avoiding talking about it, avoiding places where you were when the event happened, avoiding anything that reminds you of the event, and then intrusive thoughts, which would include the nightmares, the flashbacks, and the obsessive thinking about the situation. So all of those are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And after a traumatic event, if those symptoms last the first month, it's called acute stress disorder. But if they've lasted more than a month, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So when Ruth came to see me, I immediately provided her with some tools that she could use to begin to calm herself physiologically right now. And those are tools that I do with almost every trauma victim, which include learning to diaphragmatically breathe, learning a safe place exercise, and learning some grounding techniques. And these three things are critically important. And I do have a free mini series that I've put online for people if you wanted to access these techniques. It's me providing guided visualization and instruction on how to do these three techniques, and it's free. The link is below. I call it the mini series. But that's what I did with her the first session, as well as getting some history and having her tell me the story of what happened. From that first session, I definitely had a sense that Ruth would recover fairly quickly because she was able to access feelings of physiological safety in my office, which is a very positive sign. She also described her childhood, and she had two loving parents. She was very attached to them. She had a close-knit family, and it's not that there weren't any problems, because there always are, but primarily she had a very solid upbringing, and she was currently married to a man who was very supportive, and she had some close friends. So she really had a lot of support in her life, and she had been given a very good base at birth. And that kind of background definitely assists in recovery. And I would actually say it's pretty rare to have that kind of background these days. Most people have many more traumas in their life, and that can make treatment much more complex. But in today's video, I'm not talking about complex PTSD. I will be releasing one in a couple of weeks on that topic. But coming back to Ruth, she had a very good base for recovery. So often verbalizing what happened to you if you've had this type of trauma is one of the hardest things, and the shame keeps us from doing that. And then the shame grows and grows and makes it worse and makes it harder. But once you actually are able to verbalize it to a supportive person, which Ruth was, and then come see a therapist who also can be non-judgmental, compassionate, and listen fully, just that effort of telling your story can also often be very helpful. I began to work with Ruth using EMDR techniques, and if you'd like to know more about how that works, I have a video, put the link above, called How Does EMDR Work? And for Ruth, within 4 sessions, she no longer was having nightmares. She was no longer having panic attacks. She could think about what happened to her without feeling those physiological fight, flight, and freeze feelings. A core belief she had when she came into therapy was that she had somehow done something wrong, but through the therapy process, she was able to see it like you and I see it, which is that she did nothing wrong at all, and a horrible thing happened to her. Hey, I'm jumping in here. Actually, it's a little bit like Back to the Future, because I was editing this video and had pretty much had it finished when I realized I really want to go back into the video and emphasize something. So that is what I'm doing now. And what I would like to emphasize is that the two traumas I'm talking about in this video, while horrible sexual traumas, they were not attachment traumas. They were not sexual assaults, sexual abuse from somebody that the person was attached to. And attachment traumas impact us in a different way and can take much more extended time to recover from. 4 sessions for Ruth helped her get over the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms she was having. That does not mean it fully resolved what had happened to her and for her full processing. Traumatic events like these change how we view the world. And there actually can be almost a spiritual element of figuring out, how do I move forward with my life knowing that something like this happened to me or could happen to me. So I just want to be really clear that I'm using 2 examples, very specific, individual, single traumas, because the last thing I would like to do with this video is to make somebody feel horrible if they have been in therapy for a long time, which many people who have been sexually abused have very extended periods of treatment, and the situations all vary. So these are just 2 very specific examples. So back to the video. So Tabitha's story was very different, and I'm going to keep this very short, but there are like 2 points I would like to highlight with regard to the situation, because I think it's also something that I have seen fairly often. So Tabitha came to see me. She was married with 2 children, ages 5 and 10. And she had suddenly, and it was a good marriage, she loved her husband, they had a good relationship, and she had suddenly become almost afraid of her husband, and she was having panic responses if he approached her in particular ways. If he approached her too suddenly, or he approached her in a manner where she felt cornered, she suddenly began to panic and push him away, and it was clearly causing problems in their relationship. He did not understand at all what was happening, and she didn't really understand what was happening either. And in our first session, she told me that she had been raped at the age of 10. The situation was that she had been left home alone, and a relative who had recently gotten out of jail came to the door, and she let him in, and he raped her. And she received a lot of family support at the time, which is very, very helpful for rape victims. I would just like to point out that one of the most important things for people who've been sexually assaulted is that they are supported by their loved ones. If that happens, the likelihood of them developing post-traumatic stress disorder or long-term problems really declines. So at that age, she received a lot of family support. She was not questioned in any way. Her actions were not judged by people, and everybody knew what had happened and that this person belonged back in jail. So it was horrific, yet she had a loving family that supported her through it, and she kind of took the entire event, put it aside, and went on with her life. So when she came to see me, she knew that there must be some connection between these events, but she had no idea why it hit her out of the blue. And while I don't know for sure, something that I have seen happen very often, if something horrible happened to us at a particular age, when our kids get to that age, we begin to experience those symptoms. It's completely subconscious. It's not sometimes it's front of the mind for people, because they will get hypervigilant around their children at that age, and they will know why. But sometimes it's completely subconscious, and being out of conscious thought and conscious memory is really outside of our control. So my theory is that why this hit her all of a sudden is that her daughter hit 10 years old. So the therapy process with Tabitha lasted longer, probably 6 months, and yet she was able to make fairly quick progress in terms of lowering her physiological arousal, understanding what had happened to her, processing the childhood event in a fuller way with an adult mind looking at it, because it's so different when we look at something that happened to us as kids with the help of a therapist, with some distance from the event, and with our cognition and understanding as adults, we're able to process it very differently. So with Tabitha, again, I used the EMDR process, which meant that we really drilled into what the negative thoughts about herself and the world were that arose from that event. And then we looked at those, and one of them was true at the time of the event, like, I'm in danger, I'm powerless, this is horrible. Like, that's true at the time of the event, but it was no longer true in her life now. And so the EMDR process helps integrate that both from the mind and the body. One benefit that Tabitha had was that she did not take on responsibility for this having happened. She knew it was not her fault. She knew it was not something about her. And yet when that happens to children, there still is some kind of feeling of, there must be something wrong with me, or this wouldn't have happened to me. There must be something disgusting about me. There must be something horrific about me. I must be bad in some way for this to happen. Because children have magical thinking, and that is part of magical thinking, thinking that you cause things you don't cause. And those beliefs are very, very ingrained when something like this happens to us at such a young age. And another reason I thought it was important to include the story of Tabitha is that her symptoms reoccurred 30 years after the event. So sometimes, as in the case of the story I told about Ruth, the symptoms happen immediately after the event, and sometimes there's a very delayed response of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. So if that is happening to you, you are not crazy and you have a treatable condition. And having a therapist that you feel connected to and you can trust is very important. And I released a video called Find an EMDR Therapist that actually would also have tools for finding any other kind of therapist, but you can access that with the link above. So if you experience a sexual assault, I highly recommend calling the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Here's the National Sexual Abuse Hotline, the phone number and the website. I'm also including the National Domestic Violence Hotline and the National Teen Dating Abuse Hotline. All of these hotlines are confidential. You don't even need to tell them your real name. They will not force you to report. They will not force you to do anything at all, but they will be there to help you talk through options, figure out how to get help, figure out what help you might need, and they are there on a repeated basis as well. You can screenshot this page, or you can access these links in the notes below. And for my international listeners, I've identified these two organizations that provide services in a large number of languages and for a large number of countries. This information will also be in the notes below, or you can screenshot this page. And for those people who fall outside of these areas, many of these services go country by country, so it'd be very useful to look at what local services that you can find via your own internet. And if you're in a domestic violence situation where someone might be monitoring your computer use, you can go to a local library, hopefully, or access internet through a friend. I would recommend that. Help is available, recovery is available, and any comments or questions, please leave them below. I try to answer every single one. Until the next time.